Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a lonely shepherd, and this shepherd used to spend all his time out in the fields, walking over mountains and glens, looking after his sheep. And most of the time he enjoyed his job. Some of the times he was quite bored, because as much as he talked to the sheep, it wasn't that often that the sheep talked back. In fact, the sheep only talked back on the days when he'd had too much rum. Now, you'd be wondering, where did the shepherd get rum from? Well, I'll tell you. The shepherd used to be a pirate. Now, that's quite an unusual job swap, to go from a pirate to a shepherd. But, this was quite an unusual man. And this man's name was Jethro. And Jethro was now one of the best sheep farmers in the whole country. And if you're wondering what country he was in your country. That's right. This story is tailored to whoever is listening to it. Now, you know that area of your country where all the farmers are, and there's lots of grass and cows and sheep and pigs and dogs and women. Well, that's where he was. And he spent all his time divided between being at home and being out in the fields looking after his sheep. And he had, have a guess how many sheep he had? No more than that. He had 4. Now, you might think it wasn't be too hard to look after 4 sheep. But remember, he started off being a pirate. So, he wasn't exactly the best farmer. Not the best sheep farmer, anyway. He was even worse looking after chickens. But that's a story for another day. Now, he didn't live on the farm on his own. As well as having the 4 sheep, he also had a wife. And his wife's name was Jessica. So Jessica and Jethro lived on their farm with 4 sheep. Now, you might wonder why I mentioned the sheep before I mentioned the wife. You might think, hey, this story's a wee bit sexist. But he's a farmer. He's a what he called? He's a shepherd. And, if I had said once upon a time there was a man who was married, you'd go, so what? That happens all the time. And you'd be right. So give yourself a wee pat on the back and remember that you were right at least once today. And no one can take that away from you. So, let's get back to the story. Jessica and Jethro were on their farm one day, when lo and behold, who do you think came along but their postman? And their postman was called Peter, and he had a brother called Pat, but that's a different story for copyright reasons. So Postman Peter So Postman Peter came up to the house that was part of the farm, and he said to Jethro, he said, Jethro, I've got a big package for you. And Jethro, being a former pirate, raised an eyebrow, and he says, I bet you do, you big boy, arr. And Jessica gave Jethro a bad look, and she said, Jethro, how many times have I told you to stop making Postman Peter uncomfortable with your innuendos? And Jethro said, I don't know, I don't listen to a word you say. And then Jessica said, well, if you don't know, if you don't listen to a word I say, then how come you answered me? And Jethro said, Huck woman, would you go and give my head peace? I don't know why I ever married you. And then Jessica said, Peter, I'm so sorry that you have to listen to all this. And Postman Peter said, it's okay. I heard worse in my time. I've been a postman all my life. And Jethro said, are you sure? Did you not used to be a pirate like me? And Postman Peter said, no, I wasn't. And Postman Peter said, no, I wasn't. And then, what do you call him? Then Jethro said, well then, how come you've got a wooden leg and one eye? And Peter said, well, you know, it's rude to ask personal questions. And Jessica said, Jethro, I'm going to take you out the back and give you a slap round the head for making Peter so uncomfortable. And Jethro said, God, Jesus save us, it's no wonder I spend so much time out there with the sheep. And Peter said, whoa, I'm sure you love being out there with the sheep, you boyo. And then Jethro said, hey, at least I'm not Welsh. And then Peter said, well, neither am I. I don't know why you're saying that, boy. I'm not Welsh either. And then Jethro just looked around and he says, right, you know what, fellas? I'm out of here. And he turned round and he walked down the lane and he jumped over the hill. He jumped over the hedge and he said to himself, God, listen, sometimes I wonder why I bothered leaving this ship. And then he whistled at the top of his voice. Do you whistle with the top of your voice? I suppose you wouldn't. Then he whistled with the top of his lungs. That doesn't make sense either. He whistled really loud. And he whistled. I was going to say he said, but he whistled. And then he shouted, Oi, Rover. And the cat came running. You thought it was going to be a dog, but no, it was a cat. And the cat ran the opposite direction, because cats are buggers and no one likes them. Anyway, so he walked on. And he walked over the hill and down the valley and round another hill. And he came upon his 4 sheep. And now you might think to yourself, Mr. Storyteller, what were the names of his sheep? Well, Jethro, being a former pirate, he called his sheep Blackbeard, Silver, Mr. Tibbs, and Boris. Yes, we'll go for Boris. So, now the question you'll be asking yourself would be, Mr. Storyteller, I dare you to remember those same 4 names again. And I'll tell you that they were Blackbeard, Silver, Mr. Tibbs, and bars. Anyway, so he called one of the sheep Blackbeard because he had a black bill. Sheep don't have bills, ducks have bills. Anyway, so let's carry on. So he sat there talking to his sheep, and he said, Blackbeard, Mr. Tibbs, Silver, and Boris, I'm glad to be out here in the fields, in God's good fresh air. I've been out here on my own with you four fellas. It takes me back to being out in the middle of the ocean, on the ship, when I was just a poor pirate, with nothing around me but water and mates. And here I am, surrounded by green, green grass. Come back here, you buggers, I'm talking to you. Because, would you believe, even though he was talking to them in the nicest and softest voice, the four sheep just walked off. Because some people just aren't really that appreciative of a good conversation or of a good story. But I'm sure you enjoy a good story if you're still here. You're wondering, I wonder, will the good story ever start? Well, let's find out. So, Jethro walked after his sheep, and he walked up the hill and down the hill, up the hill and down the hill, and then he took a breath. What did he take? He took a breather. That was a mixture between a breather and a rest. Sometimes the storyteller mixes two words together. It's like the time I went into a shop and I asked for a Rosamund slice. And the guy looked at me and he says, "Oh, what?" And I said, "Sorry, I meant to say a raspberry and almond slice." And somehow my mind said a Rosamund slice. Anyway, let's go back to the story which you're thoroughly enjoying, aren't you? Yes, good. So Jethro was out looking for his sheep. Meanwhile, back at the house, back on the farm, Jessica and Peter were going at it like rabbits. Anyway, so Jethro walked over the fields, and he jumped into the next field. And who was standing there but his neighbour, Farmer Tom? And Tom said, "Where, Jethro, how are ye doing today?" And Farmer Jethro said, "Tom boy, you big bollocks, how are ye? I haven't seen ye in a lifetime." And Tom said, "Well, Jethro, I don't know about you, but I thought I saw you last week at the big dance." And Jethro said, "Aye, I suppose you might have been, you might have seen me, but I didn't see you." And Tom said, "Well, I saw your wife there. I saw Jessica. She was looking mighty pretty." And Jethro said, "Aye, I suppose she was. To tell you the truth, I don't really notice these days. We spend that much time arguing. I suppose she's not a bad-looking woman sometimes." And Tom said, "Jethro, you old bollocks, have a look at her. My God, man, there's not a man in the country that wouldn't take your wife for a ride." And Jethro says, "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Tom, would you hold your tongue? Who do you think you're talking to? I'll get the dog to jump on you, so I will." And Farmer Tom said, "Dog? What dog? Sure, I thought you had a cat." And then Jethro said, "Aye, but sometimes I get forgetful halfway through a story." Anyway, Anyway, as I was saying, don't you be so disrespectful about my wife. And Tom said, I'm very sorry. I'm sorry for any insult you may have taken. I was just letting you know that I think you should be more appreciative of what you've got. Because, that you haven't got much going for you, being a former pirate and just having 4 sheep. And Jethro said, Tom, if I wanted your opinion, I'd ask for it. Why don't you go and take a long walk off a short pier? And then Tom said, well, Jethro, considering we're 200 miles inland, I don't think that's going to happen too soon. And he just stormed off and he walked back into his own farmhouse. And as you would probably imagine, this put Jethro in a mighty bad mood. And he turned round and he walked up a hill and down a hill, up a hill and then round a corner. And he was looking back at his own farmyard. And he was looking down into his front door, and he saw Postman Peter coming out. And as he was going out, he was tucking his shirt back into his trousers, or for you American people, into his pants. For us, that would be something different. That would make this story a whole lot worse, but kind of the same. You get what I mean. So, anywho, Jethro walked down the hill, and he walked faster and faster towards the house, trying to catch up with Postman Peter. And he came within about 20 yards of him. He shouted, Oi, you hairy bugger, come back here. And Peter, realizing he'd been caught, jumped in his post van and drove off as fast as he could. Jethro stormed into the house, and he found Jessica sitting at the grand piano, and he said, Hey girl, what the Jesus was going on between you and Peter? And then all of a sudden Jessica turned at him and said, Why do you have such a strong Irish farmer accent? I thought you were a pirate a while ago. And then Jethro says, Arr, I was, and arr, I will always be. But what kind of woman are you, that there's some man coming out of this house, tucking his shirt into his pants, trousers, whatever you want to call them? What were you two up to? And Jessica said, in the name of God, don't be silly. He was in the bathroom having a big shite, and he was just tucking himself in. Away in and smell the place if you don't believe me. And Jethro said, Is that right? Is that right? Is that what you think? And he stormed into the bathroom, and he came out a second later, and he went, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, it's fucking stinking in there. And Jessica said, Sure, didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you that's what it was? And then Jethro said, I don't know what kind of man would go into another man's house and leave a smell like that. That's about the worst thing in the world he could do. And Jessica just looked up and smiled to herself. And she thought to herself, well, there's something else he could do that would be worse. But I'm not telling anything to Jethro, because he's a big bollocks and I can't stand him. And Jethro just walked out of the house and he just walked about the farm and he looked for Blackbeard, Silver, Mr. Tibbs and Bars, wondering if they were back yet, because sometimes he forgot the sheep need to be led back to the farm. And he was walking about and thinking to himself, and the more he thought to himself, the more angry he got. And he was just getting more and more annoyed, thinking about Postman Peter doing a shite in his house. Just like, what kind of dirty animal does that in another man's house? You know what? I'm gonna go after him. So he did. So he went over the field and across a hill and then round the corner, and then he took a boat across the lake, and then he went down a hill, up a road, jumped on a bus, paid £2.40 for the ticket, and then he got off at Postman Peter's house. And he knocked on the door, and Postman Peter said, "Who's there?" And Jethro said, "Why don't you open the fucking door and you'll find out?" And Peter came to the door all nervous, because he was now just Peter, not Postman Peter, because he wasn't at work. And he says, "Hello, Jethro, what can I do for you?" And he says, "I want to have a word with you, you boy. What kind of man do you think you are, coming to my house and defiling my house like that?" And Peter started to panic. And he was like, listen, it wasn't just me. He says, Jessica was there too. And Jethro was like, "What? You both did it?" And Peter says, yes. He says, we're both at it. We both did it. You can't just blame me. We both did it at the same time. And Jethro said, What? Where? You were doing it at the same time? What sort of stuff? What? Just, what? And Peter was like, yeah. I thought that's, do you know how it works? Do you not understand what it takes two? And Jethro said, "You were both taking a shite at the same time." And Peter goes, What are you talking about? I thought you were here because I bucked her." And Jethro said, "You dirty, cheating bastard. I came here because you did a shit in my house." And Peter said, "Oh, I did that too." And Jethro said, "You see, if you ever cross the path of my ground again, I will take my sword that I brought back from my days on the sea, and I will chop your willy off and feed it to Mr. Tibbs." And Peter said, "Who's Mr. Tibbs? What's going on? What are you talking about?" And Jethro said, "He's one of my sheep." And Peter said, "That's an odd name for a sheep. Isn't that the name of a movie character? Sidney Poitier." And Jethro said, "I don't think you're taking this situation seriously. I just threatened to cut your dick off." And Peter said, I got that, but I'm sorry, you just lost me whenever you said you were going to feed it to a sheep. Or Mr. Tibbs, you know." And Jethro looked him in the eye. No, not that eye. Looked him in the eyes. And he says, "You mark my words, boy. If you ever come near my wife again, you'll feel the sharp end of my stick." And Peter said, "I thought you said it was a sword." And Jethro said, "Do you know what? I think I might just kill you now because you're so frustrating." And Peter said, No, it's okay. I understand. I won't go near Jessica again. But what if she comes near me?" And Jethro just looked at him and he said, "Well, she won't come near you again, 'cause you don't have anything she needs. And Peter said, I think if she didn't need anything from me, she wouldn't have come near me in the first place. And he raised a wee rock eyebrow and went, "Arr." Because, Peter was kind of stupid and he didn't know he should stop provoking the parrot. So, Jethro walked outside, and he just walked up and down outside Peter's house, and he was in turmoil. He didn't know what to do. He just didn't know how he could forgive his wife and how he could make sure that Peter didn't go back there and do the same thing again. So he made up his mind, and he knocked on the door again. And Peter shouted, "Who is it?" And Jethro said, "For God's sake, will you buy a peephole so you can see who it is?" And Peter said, "Oh, it's you again. What can I do for you?" And Jethro said, "It's been 2 minutes. What do you think? I'm here to have another little round of conversation with you about my Jessica." And Jethro and Peter said, "Well, what can I say, Jethro? If I'm what she wants, maybe you should step aside and just walk off the plank and just go on your merry way with your 4 wee sheep." And Jethro was fuming, because not only had he made comments about his wife, he had made comments about the times he was a parrot. So he says, "Listen here, you bio, I'm gonna do something that maybe I shouldn't do, but I'm gonna do it anyway." And Peter said, "That's a queer sentence. Where would the punctuation go in there?" And Jethro said that, "You know something? I'm just gonna do it." And before Peter had a chance to react, Peter didn't know what was coming, as Jethro just reached back with his right leg, and he just drove his foot as hard as he could between Peter's legs. And Peter went down as if he'd just been kicked by a horse. And he was lying there, and he said, "Shit, I never saw that coming." Or, words to those effect. Words to that effect. And Jethro stood over him and he said, "Listen, if you ever come back to my house, I will cut your balls off and I'll feed them to you." And Peter said, "What happened to Mr. Tibbs?" Because, as I said, he was just a stupid idiot. And then Jethro just lost all control, and he grabbed a hold of him, and he threw him out of the house, and he threw him down the hill and up the hill, and he threw him up another hill, and he threw him down the hill, which was faster than throwing him up the hill. And then he threw him around the corner, and he threw him into a boat, and they went over the lake, and they both rowed together because it made it twice as fast. And then he went up a hill and down a hill, and then he pushed him down into the front door of his farm. And out came Jessica, and Jessica looked at the state of Peter, and she said, "Jesus, Mary and Joseph, Peter, what happened to you?" And he said, Jethro did it. And Jethro looked at her and goes, I did it. It was me. And Jessica says, why did you do that for? Because he did a shit in the house. And he says, no, it was because he was bucking you. And Jessica looked at him all surprised and she said, oh, come on now, man dear. I thought you knew he was doing that. Sure, you don't come near me anymore at all. And he said, Jethro said, gee, Mom dear, why would I let any man do that? What sort of man do you take me for? And she said, but you're no use to me. Didn't you have yours cut off whenever you were a pirate? And now all you have is a little stump of wood. And Peter looked at Jethro and he says, aye, that's what you told me. And Jethro said, who told you that? And Jessica said, well, that's what it felt like whenever I was looking for it. And Jethro said, you did all this just because I've got a tiny dick. Well, here, woman dear, I'm gonna go back to being a pirate. And she said, ach, I didn't know. I thought you were some way bit of a stumped. Sure, come back to me and everything will be okay. And Peter was standing there sort of confused, not really sure where this story was going, and he was wondering why Johnny Depp was initially in the storyteller's head when he created this Peter character. And he said, I think I'm going to go now. And then Jethro said, no, you stay here and you be very happy with my wife. I'm off to spend some time with my sheep. They don't mind my stump. And Peter said, how do they know you have a stump? And that was the last silly thing that he said, because Jethro pulled out his sword and chopped his head off. Then he chopped Jessica's head off. Then he chopped Mr. Tibbs' head off. Then he chopped Silver's head off, Boris's head off, and then he chopped off the head of Blackbeard. And then he went back to his ship, to all his shipmates, and they said, well, how was your week off? And he went, arr,